Hello, and we're back with the final part of our erotic thriller.
Yeah,
videos.
my phone just like cut off for whatever reason. I don't know why. Probably too full. This has turned out to be a lot longer than we thought it would be.
It has. We've got a lot to talk about.
Lots to talk about.
I just thought I'd draw attention to the t-shirt that I'm wearing. Not really a thriller, but erotic in its own grotesque sort of way.
Oh, do not call that film erotic.
The Greasy Strangler. I chose this shirt because it's so kind of badly designed, kind of like the film. It's so
Can't talk about that.
gross.
It's an erotic thriller.
Well, I just thought because he's kind of naked, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar. But
Yeah, that is a film.
anyway, so we're getting to Bitter Moon by Polanski.
Right, now we're moving on to Polanski.
Yeah. Who's a very sort of problematic director. We're using that term so many times.
But I mean, it's funny because, back when it was made, you would have never have used the term problematic.
No, I know. I kind of don't like that term. It's just so overused. I mean, obviously there needs to be something like that, but it's just used in such a way that it becomes kind of annoying, really.
Yeah, and I try to distance myself. Like, so I love Lovecraft's writing. He was a dreadful, dreadful, horrible person, but I still enjoy what he created. I don't think I should not be able to read the exquisite sort of poetic writings of Lovecraft.
I mean,
or enjoy. I don't feel like I should not be allowed to enjoy Polanski because of what happened. Because he's a great director, so it's about that.
Unapologetically, I could say he's really one of my favorite directors. I mean, Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown and Death and the Maiden and
No one does Paranoia.
and The Ghostwriter, things like that are such good films. And The Tenant, brilliant films. But yeah, Bitter Moon is it's not one of my favorites of his, but I do really like it in a kind of an icky way because the characters are so unlikable and despicable.
It's exhausting. It's like, I think Gaspar Noé.
Like Love.
It's so much like Love. It's not quite as explicit, but it just is. You just feel exhausted by the drama that these characters are going through.
I think that everyone has probably been in a relationship like that, a really tiring, kind of taxing relationship. And
Maybe.
yeah, so we've all been there. So it reminds me of those sort of relationships.
So it's stressful to watch a film like that. You're like, especially if you've experienced it. You're like, why did I put myself through that? Why didn't these people just walk away from each other? But sometimes people don't, for whatever reason. It's
got a beautiful score by Vangelis, who did Blade Runner.
Gorgeous, yeah.
And Emmanuelle Seigneur, we've been talking about Lolita. She was quite young when she met Polanski while they were shooting this film. I think, she wasn't like 14 or anything. She was like 18, but he was, way over twice her age. So that was another problematic thing.
Well, the way that they had her sort of dressed and looking at the beginning of the film, because it sort of spans several years, she looks like a very Lolita type sort of character. She looks very, very, very young. And yeah, it's kind of awful because, you feel really sorry for her. She's definitely, being predated on by this older man at the start.
Played by Peter Coyote, who was in Femme Fatale as well.
And yeah, and it kind of breaks through. It's awful to see that process, but then it kind of turns into a bitter, horrible person. It's an interesting film. It's basically a parallel story. It's got Hugh Grant.
Yes,
yeah,
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant. So they're on a cruise ship. He's with his partner. And there's this other couple that, the older man, the younger woman, and this kind of hate-love thing, almost also ambivalence for each other. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
And so these sort of two parallel couple stories are intertwining. The older man sort of rambling on to Hugh Grant about his sexy, amazing, exciting life because he's now sort of immobilized. It is an interesting film, and being set on a cruise ship, it's quite interesting, and not one of his best, but it's certainly quite an interesting film. But depressing, heavy, exhausting. So
I've seen it quite a few times, and I've learned to kind of view it as a comedy, and you have a lot more fun if you do that.
Oh yeah,
because
I wish I could do that.
You probably will the next time you see it.
Maybe.
But anyway, I'd probably give that like a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, 2.5, 5 out of 10 hearts then for that. Yeah, it's not the worst.
Yeah. Next
grueling.
Yeah, it is grueling. Next is Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd and one of your favourites, Tommy Lee Jones.
I love Tommy Lee Jones. He directed a film called The Three Burials of Michaelis Estrada, and I really, really, really love that film. My God, it is good. And I just started really loving him even more after that. I love him in Natural Born Killers. Not the biggest role, but it's just, that was just so wonderful. His character was just so awful and wonderful at the same time.
Definitely not one of my favourite actors, but
no, I really like him.
But I do have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for him. Like, he's trying really to address these sort of systemic issues of racism and things like that. And he's a really genuine sort
Very
of guy.
underlooked film, really.
Yeah.
But Double Jeopardy, you know, it's okay. It's one of those sort of average thrillers, maybe a little bit like Shattered, that we didn't
I
think
quite
that
liked
much
it
of.
actually.
Oh, did you?
Ashley Judd plays sort of. So
She's a great actor.
she's really great, and
really
Harvey.
like her.
It's kind of like The Fugitive, but with a woman.
Oh, right.
I kind of thought that vibe was sort of going on because Ashley Judd sort of starts out as this kind of like, you know, very sweet wife that couldn't hurt a fly, and her husband gets killed or something like. He's supposed
Yeah.
I won't give too much away because you might want to watch it, but her husband's
She
killed.
kind of gets framed.
She gets framed for his murder. She loses her son. She ends up in prison, and she ends up getting quite hardened and quite tough.
She's a very strong woman
Very
in real
strong,
life. She's
yeah.
a very strong sort of feminist, and she, you know, chooses roles based on her beliefs, I think.
Oh, she's so
great.
badass, and Ashley Judd is such a badass. I really, really enjoyed seeing her and being kind of more that stereotypical male role and sort of running rings around Harvey Keitel, who's a really great, you know, he's a great detective, he's a great cop, but he has some sort of sympathy for her character while still trying to track her down and drag her back to jail. So
Which, yeah, very much like The Fugitive.
it
You're
is.
right.
It's so much like The Fugitive. I liked it a lot for that sort of role reversal, and it's another film where kind of like this woman becomes stronger and more capable of taking care of herself and going for what she wants and revenge essentially, which I love a good revenge tale.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that.
I'd probably give it 2 out of 5.
2.
Well,
Brutal.
2.5.
I'm gonna give it a.
No, it's all right, but yeah,
Okay.
nothing to write home about.
I'll give it a 4 because I want it to at least have 6 or 7 out of 10. Because I really
Tommy Lee fan.
Yeah, Tommy Lee and Ashley Judd is so badass, and it's quite a good twisty little tale. There's a few surprises in there, maybe.
Speaking of twisty, our next film is The Crush with Alicia Silverstone, which is sort of like it's very badly directed.
It's terrible.
It's
I
like a
was
90s
cracking
version
up.
of Lolita, really. Which, you know, which is funny because there is a 90s version of Lolita, which we really, really
But
like.
without any of the style.
No, it doesn't have any of that.
It is clunky. It is funny,
It's
and
very
not in
funny,
a good
yeah.
way. Like,
So bad that it's not that good.
yeah, it's funny. I laughed a lot,
Yeah.
and not in a good way. I was like, oh, really? You know, it's like eye rolling. Alicia's a strange.
Woman, what's that?
Person,
That
yeah.
feeding her kids like birds or something? What is that about? Can you
Hey,
explain that?
birding. She calls it birding. Okay, I don't know how I find these things, but yeah, she apparently likes to chew up food with her mouth and then place that food into her children's mouths, and she calls it birding.
Yes.
Cool. You know, she's quite strange.
She's
person.
strange. She was very good in the film by the Goodnight Mommy directors, The Lodge.
That is a good
She had
film.
like a sort of cameo at the start where she has this great suicide scene. Again, spoilers, belated spoilers. But
Well, no, it's right at the start of the film.
Yeah.
It's not really a spoiler. But The
you
Lodge
haven't
is a
seen the
great.
film.
That's a great film. It's very twisty. Not really a psychosexual.
No,
sort of
not
film
at all.
But it's very twisty, which is I quite
it's
enjoyed.
a horror, really.
Yeah, it is a horror.
Oh, there's a lot to The Shining.
So
And
the crush is like the worst, probably one on this list
Yeah.
by a long shot.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
quite terrible.
It was fun to watch, but yeah.
kind of fun. I mean, it's just, this is like the dad of Alicia Silverstone's character has like a roundabout merry-go-round. I like one of the horses carousel with horses and up in his attic.
That guy, what's his? I've forgotten his name. He's got a really interesting name, but he was in RoboCop as the villain. It's a real guilty pleasure watch. This one.
I found it just no pleasure.
So yeah, I'd give it maybe 1.5 or 2.
I give it a 1. It was horrible. It was terrible. Yeah.
Okay, and next up is China Moon, which
I watched last night.
yeah, recent viewing. We saw Ed Harris was in that, and very young baby Benicio del Toro.
who I always say is like the Puerto Rican Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
I don't know why people don't realize just how good he is and how he's a really good looking guy. I think he's real leading man material, and he even kind of talks a little bit like...
He has become more of a leading man like in the last couple of decades, but
also,
back then, you know...
Yeah, he wasn't sort of seen as this great big leading man, hunky sort of chap, but he's beautiful and fantastic actor and so interesting in everything he does.
It was around the same time that he shot Basquiat as well, where he plays like a weird sort of
amalgamation
of John Laurie and a couple of other people in Basquiat's life.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah. Everything he's in, you know, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he's just glorious. What else was he in? Was he in that Denis Villeneuve film?
Sicario.
He's in that, right?
He's great in that.
He's so good in that.
Very good role.
So I was really, it was just so lovely to see him so young and playing across with an actor like as esteemed as Ed Harris and totally holding his own.
Ed Harris had just, you know, was hot off his performance in The Abyss, which he found such a stressful performance.
That was not a fun movie for the actors.
Yeah, he nearly said no to the role because he was still kind of, you know, like having PTSD from The Abyss. Which a lot of the cast apparently called the bitch.
Was it James Cameron?
Yeah, James Cameron.
Yeah, James Cameron can be a real taskmaster.
He's the taskmaster.
The one.
Master, actually. Yeah, he's one of the worst, you know, apparently, for pushing his cast and crew to sort of, you know, produce something way beyond the level that they used to.
I really like
and they are. I mean Terminator 2 and they were such amazing films.
And the performances in The Abyss are amazing. All of us, well, let's not even talk about Avatar because they just...
Oh, no. He's making 5 of them at the moment.
Who the hell watches those movies?
How sad to be devoting the rest of his life to these, like, blue, kind of goopy sort of films.
Oh, it's so bad. They're so bad. How do they make so much money? Whoever's paying to see these movies, or how dare you, because they're making those movies instead of good ones. Terrible films.
Yeah. But China Moon, it's a solid sort of neo-noir. Again, it's got Madeline Stowe in it. Who was in Unlawful Entry. She sort of turns up in a few of these. She was also in another one called Blink, where she was the leading character, which wasn't too bad, actually. But yeah, not a huge fan of her.
It's not a bad film.
It's sort of interesting from the filmmaking perspective. I find, you know, it kind of references films like Chinatown, which, I mean, even the title China Moon.
And there's a few, you know, you sort of think, oh, this is so formulaic, you know what's going to happen. But there are a few little twists and turns in there that I didn't quite expect. So yeah.
So I'd give it 2.5.
Yeah, I reckon it. About 5 out of 10 hearts, I'd say.
Yeah. Next up is one that I really didn't like. I've seen it before, but I'd forgotten that I really didn't like it. It's called A Perfect Murder.
That's Gwyneth Paltrow being dreadful and unlikable, and so is Michael Douglas is dreadful and unlikable.
They're just such bourgeois fucks, and I felt like I needed a shower spending so much time with these really kind of icky
with terrible taste
people.
in art. Hideous.
I hate it when Hollywood films, you know, they'll have a character who's supposed to be a really good painter, and they're just not. I mean, he's not even a painter. He's like they're like big blown up photographs.
That he splashes
paint
on. He just
splashes a bit of paint on it. Not even in a Pollock kind of way, just like really bad way. Anyway, I really, really didn't like this film.
I thought it was so dreadful. I didn't like any of the characters, even Viggo Mortensen, who I normally quite like because you know he's worked with Cronenberg.
Played this very dumb sort of character, which is very weird because he speaks like 8 or 9 different languages in real life, and
dumb and thuggish and a terrible artist. Sorry, Viggo, if some of those paintings apparently were his.
They were.
And I was like, let's see what they're like. They were not good paintings, and there's just not really any good art featured in it, and it's just.
It's an interesting film in that it was directed by Andrew Davis, who also directed The Fugitive, which we were just mentioning before. But I think he was out of his comfort zone when he made this film because he's good at these very kind of macho action thrillers, but this was more a different sort of genre, you know, the erotic thriller. And the pacing was a little bit off, and you know, it came off like a third-rate Hitchcock or something. I mean, it's actually a remake of Dial M for
For
Murder,
Murder.
which was directed by Hitchcock, featuring Grace Kelly. But yeah, I'm going to give it a 1.
Oh, I definitely get a 1. Virgo, so disappointed, bro. We like you, but yeah, this was a stinker.
Yep.
Really stinky.
But on the other hand, the next one...
So was that a 2 out of 10?
2 out of 10.
Yeah, not good. Bad.
The next one is one that we both really liked, and that's Cruising by William Friedkin.
Yes, Al Pacino plays an undercover cop that is playing a gay character. He's trying to track down a gay serial killer. So he gets to dress up in like kinky leather daddy gear and like go into a sex club. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Oh, Al Pacino, you are wow.
Even more amazing is the fact that it's based on a true story. In The Exorcist, which I was just talking about before.
Yes.
The Exorcist, there's those really traumatic scenes where Reagan is in the hospital having these sort of tests done on her. And there's one scene with a radiologist, and he talks to Reagan a couple of times, and he's quite comforting. And he only has, a couple of lines, but that guy ended up being a serial killer a couple of years later, and he was gay, and he had targeted gay men. And he's even...
That's so freaky.
It's so freaky. And
so freaky.
That character is even in Mindhunter, in the second season of Mindhunter. He's quite a helpful character that they go and get all this information from. Apparently he was quite... the character...
He helped them.
Yeah. Well, he seemed like he was helping them, but then he became a bit sort of cocky or had a bit of attitude.
Because Ed Kemper was the one who actually helped them.
Yeah, no, he wasn't as helpful as Ed, but he seemed like it at first. He was a bit kind of two-faced. But William Friedkin, in researching Cruising, actually went to visit this guy in hospital, in prison.
Same thing.
Yeah, it is in a way. I've just been in hospital, and it was a bit like being in prison. Not that I've been in prison, but it felt like that. But yeah, anyway, it's a pretty interesting film. Very cool soundtrack featuring lots of kind of sort of punk and rock music that might be used in underground gay clubs.
It was actually realistic music, so a lot of the time Hollywood does not get those things right.
No.
Not even a little bit. But
William Friedkin's quite a stickler for authenticity, and he chose music like the Germs, who are one of my favourite punk bands.
It's really grimy, it's really authentic. Al Pacino is so good. I was so happy that he chose a role like this and he nailed it.
Yep.
Really showed how professional and versatile he is in this film. I love Cruising. I think it's just, I don't know why it's not more...
Yeah, it's definitely got a cult following.
Yeah,
it's one of Friedkin's better films after The Exorcist, and I still haven't seen it, and I feel terrible saying that, but The French Connection,
I haven't seen that either.
That's I think that won Academy Awards, and it's sort of regarded as one of those. It's the film that really made him famous. But then we also just watched Sorcerer recently, which I really love.
That's really fun too.
And To Live and Die in LA is a really, really good has a really good early performance by Willem Dafoe. But yeah, he's done some great films, but unfortunately later he's not kind of his films aren't quite as good. I mean, they're a bit trashier. Like one that you really liked, Bug.
I like Bug.
I liked it too.
I was surprised that Friedkin was behind it, because
Yeah.
it's a very sort of pared back, low budget sort of film, more like a play really.
I think unfortunately that's the only sort of thing he can get financed these
That's
days,
such a shame.
which is crazy because
Yeah.
he's such an important director. But and funnily enough, Bug was actually written by Tracy Letts, who was the screenwriter and actor that was in Deep Water, the film that we started this whole
We're coming around again. The eternal return.
Yes, yeah, Nietzsche.
So Cruising, I give that's like 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'd give it
hearts.
3.5.
Harsh.
No, that's
So
pretty
about
good.
7.5 hearts.
That's
Definitely
good
watch it if
rating.
you haven't seen it. It's so cool. It is so cool.
Yeah. And next up is David Cronenberg's Crash, which I don't know if you can see it here, but this is my Crash mug. What does it say here? Maybe the next one, darling. And
So
it's got
very end sequence.
a shot of them embracing after they've had an erotic car crash.
Yeah.
if those such
Crash
things.
is such a good film, but I bet there are a lot of people that absolutely hate it because they're a little bit squeamish about car crashes and scars and surgery and stuff. But it's Cronenberg, so what do you expect? It is so good.
It's body horror, but a little bit different to his usual kind of horror films. I saw it at the movies with three other people when it came out in 1996. And they all detested the film. They hated it, and they were just like, they didn't just not like it, but the entire car trip home after seeing it, they just couldn't stop like tearing it apart. And I just absolutely adored the film, and I have ever since. And I've seen that film so many times, you know, at least like 30 times. I love it very much. Beautiful score by Howard Shore, very austere, clinical score, which you hear it. You know, these crashing kind of icy electric guitars, which is very different to anything else he's done.
And it's got some quite violent, sort of almost sexually violent scenes, which I'm sure some people didn't appreciate. But they're all necessary. I think a lot of the times with sex scenes in films, they're kind of unnecessary. That like, did you really need to show all that? With Crash, you need to show everything that's happening. That's part of what makes it. It explains every scene is for a reason. It's not just extraneous sexual scenes. It's such an interesting exploration of like different fetishes. I saw it when I was about 16, and I just had like really quite intense surgery, and I have this massive scar. And so to see people,
we both do.
We both have these sort of matching scars. Mine's a bit longer, but I don't know, something about seeing that film and seeing that some people appreciate scars made me feel better about my scars and made me not see the world this straight and narrow view that I'd been sort of thrust upon me up to that point. So for me, it was actually a really helpful film. Made me feel better about myself, about my scars, about...
A lot of it's set in a hospital as well.
Yeah.
You know, something we can both relate to.
And it kind of makes that experience empowering rather than disabling. And so instead of feeling like, oh, I'm ugly, I'm scarred, and no one's ever going to want me, it was more like, no, I'm interesting, I've got these scars. Like, they're kind of really beautiful in a way. So Cronenberg taught me how to love my body, even though it was considered to some imperfect, you know, because, you know, I had this 16-year-old body and it was all perfect until this big scar came along. But
he once famously said that we should have beauty contests for the insides of our bodies. He also said about Crash that he didn't intend for it to be erotic at all. It's, you know, more clinical, and it's based on the novel by J.G. Ballard, and that's one of my all-time favourite novels as well. One that I've read a few times.
That's really, it's so weird because he's writing about these really extreme kind of sexual scenarios, but in a very clinical, detached way. So it's fascinating. It's kind of messes with your head a little bit the way he's writing, but I found it
quite
really,
poetic in a sort of clinical way. It's interesting.
Very, very interesting. So I love Crash. I really love Cronenberg. I love how he made me feel less alone, and like that there are other people that kind of saw things in a different way, and just with all the experiences I've had with surgery in hospitals, it just sort of gave me a different perspective on things. So I think it's a very, very important film in a lot of ways, and just a great film in of itself. Yep,
definitely. I'd give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'd give it 5 because it was such an important film to me.
Did we mention the performance by Elias Koteas?
We kind of alluded to it before when we talked about
that's insane. Like he plays this character named Vaughn, who's very sort of picking up prostitutes, and he gets these medical tattoos on his chest, and he has these
he's so grimy and gross and quite violent, and
he holds these underground kind of car crashes where the two people in each car will dress up as, for example, James Dean, and they'll kind of
reenact the famous car crash that ended in James Dean's death.
So that's a big part of the storyline.
Yeah, that's probably the most different take on the sort of erotic kind of thriller, but one of the most interesting to me.
I almost wouldn't consider it part of these, you know, the list of these films, but it
does kind of fit into it.
But it does fit into it in its own way. Yeah. So next up is Single White Female, which we saw very recently with Jennifer Jason Leigh.
And Bridget Fonda?
Yep, that's right. Another score by Howard Shore, who did Crash.
Great score.
Quite a different one. Quite similar to his Silence of the Lambs score.
That's funny. I love Jennifer Jason Leigh. She just kind of goes around like just being crazy and getting crazier and, you know, getting more violent towards people. Fantastic role from
quite
her.
an iconic sort of character. A lot of people sort of reference that character.
Yeah.
And it's directed by a French guy named Barbet Schroeder, who kind of like Paul Verhoeven ended up moving to Hollywood in the late 80's and early 90's and made these films, quite sort of, some of them are forgettable films. He made a really good film called Reversal of Fortune, which won an Academy Award, I think, for Glenn Close. Maybe Jeremy Irons did, but that was a very, very good film. And then he made these other films like Kiss of Death with Nicolas Cage and God, I can't even remember some of the other ones, but they're worth watching. They're pretty interesting. And he made one called Before and After with Liam Neeson and Meryl Streep, which is pretty good.
Yeah, so it's a good solid stabby, violent, sex, rah, New York apartments.
Yes, it's good for New York setting as well. It's cool for that.
Yeah.
I'd probably give it 2.5, 3.
Yeah, I'd give it about the same. So about 6 out of 10. It's one of those films that you normally think of when you think of this sort of genre. And it is really good. And I wish Jennifer Jason Leigh had not done that weird stuff to her mouth.
I know.
Because she's so beautiful she didn't need to do that. And
she could have aged naturally, you know.
Naturally, and she's such a beautiful, amazing person. It's quite sad that she's gotten all that work done to her face because she looks weird now, fish lips. But I love her. So, yeah, very cool.
The next one is another slightly kind of elevated film, one that I wouldn't have seen as part of this list, but U-Turn by Oliver Stone. It is really a thriller and it's erotic, you know, so why can't it be part of this list? J-Lo is in it. She's in The Cell as well, and she can be a good actor.
She can be very good, yeah.
Yeah. And
you can't be a snob about her just because she's a musician.
No.
She's actually quite good.
I recently watched Hustlers, which she's in hospital, and that was quite trashy fun, really. But yeah.
The U-Turn is a very good film.
It is very well made. You know, it's definitely owes a lot to the noir genre of the 40s and 50s.
It's very lurid. It's got lots of weird characters popping up. Lots of blooming violence.
Probably the most similar film Oliver Stone made to Natural Born Killers and like the edits and stuff like that. It's gorgeous film to look at. Yeah,
Jennifer Lopez is so gorgeous in it. She really is the perfect. She's probably, out of all of the femme fatales, probably I think the most femme fatale, the most gorgeous, the most supposedly vulnerable, but actually very strong. Yeah, really, really great film, U-Turn, definitely. And just, it's so up there because of the direction, really, the director.
Yeah, I'd give it a 3.5.
Oh.
Yep.
I'd give it a 4.
Yeah, 3.5, 4 maybe. So
about 8, 7, 8 out of 10 hearts. Yeah, definitely give U-Turn a watch if you haven't. It's a lot. And it's not quite as intense as Natural Born Killers, so it's a good segue into Oliver Stone if you're a little bit scared of him.
Yeah. Next up is Angel Heart.
Is this our last one?
No, there's one after that.
Oh, Angel Heart. I love that. I was really sad that film was not more famous because it is absolutely fantastic.
Definitely a cult favourite of a lot of people.
I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, directed by Alan Parker, British director, featuring Mickey Rourke in one of his sort of earlier roles. It's a very, very good role. Good performance.
And Robert De Niro. What? Yes.
Yes. And shall I spoil it and say who he plays? Or?
No. I knew straight away who he was supposed to be. That I was like, hey, what about those nails and that? And I was just like, ooh. Oh boy, yeah, it was a proper kind of neo-noir. Yeah. Absolutely, like actual proper. It's very disturbing. So if you're a little bit, if you're a bit sensitive, I wouldn't recommend this film because it actually gets so dark and so disturbing. Like, it's just like, wow, did they actually really do that? But I kind of love films that really push things way beyond where they kind of could be. And the performances are so good. And it's such a
Lisa Bonet, isn't it? As well?
Yeah, Lisa Bonet. She's very young in it. And I mean, there's all these amazing scenes of kind of like witch doctors, kind of shaman, African-American, or Haitian shaman kind of witch doctory stuff going on. Very, very cool, very atmospheric, a very gorgeous film.
So I'd give this a 4.
Probably. Yeah, I'll give it a 4 too. Easy. 8 hearts out of 10. really blew me away. I was really surprised how good it was, and kind of shocked that it wasn't something that had come up on my radar before. I loved it.
So we're going to finish this with a bit of a stinker called Hush.
Hush.
One that I watched in hospital. I don't know why I haven't watched it before now.
Oh,
but
well, no, this is Jennifer.
it was all right.
What's the name?
Jessica Lange.
Jessica Lange. I love Jessica Lange.
What's wrong with the little Lang is what what Jason Schwartzman's character in I Heart Huckabees says, because he's like in an autograph hound shop, and he's like he's placing his own photos and autographs next to the Lang, and he's like, what's wrong with the little Lang?
What's wrong with the little Lang? Lang is spectacular in this, though. Very much like her character in
Very
American
campy.
Horror Story. Yeah. I was like, this is American Horror Story Lang. I love her. She is gorgeous and fantastic and mesmerizing, but it is not a very good film.
And Gwyneth again.
Can't they just find someone else occasionally?
Yeah.
I don't know. She just leaves me. I just don't care. And it's a really creepy, kind of sort of a bit incestuous film between a mother and his son, who crosses so many boundaries.
It reminded me a little bit of Mommy Dearest or something. In some ways. The campiness.
Yeah. But it's not a very good,
No.
not a very good film.
Not very good. I'd give it a 2.
Yeah, I'd give it a 2. Or 3 for Lang. So I'll give it 5 out of 10, because no film that Lang could ever be could be under 5, because she is just mwah. Love her.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end.
Well, so well done if you've managed to make it to the end of our mega marathon that it turned into. Let us know if there's any that we've missed that you'd like to see covered. I mean, we haven't talked about The Hand That Rocks Cradle, because I want to watch that again.
Comment with your favourite.
Comment with
erotic
your
thrillers.
favourite.
We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and any foreign ones that we might not have heard of or seen. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that and agreed or disagreed with our reviews, our ratings. Let us know what you think. And if you've seen any of them because we've recommended them, let us know, because we want to know what you think about them as well.
And we'll catch you next week for Paul Verhoeven's Benedetta.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.